Welcome everyone to a video hello for our course 5160. Um, I just wanted to present you a short video that tried to accomplish two things. One, to give you a bit of more background about myself and hopefully provide insight through that of how I am approaching this course and teaching this course. And secondly, a little bit more about the scope of the course itself, why I've chosen the focus that I have, and what I hope that you might be able to accomplish and achieve from taking this course. Just a little bit on my background. I actually have a fairly diverse academic background, undergraduate in music. I studied pipe organ. And after that, in fact, after a year of studying theology, I decided I'd come back to school at the graduate level and was interested in how music was processed by the brain. And so I took an PhD in experimental psychology, hoping to continue research in music perception and how the brain processes music. But at the end of my PhD, I uh, ended up going and working in high tech in Ottawa for about 15 years with, in fact, my previous PhD supervisor who had moved there ahead of me. Um, and then in 2000, I had an opportunity to move east to St. John, New Brunswick, and an opportunity to come back to the university and to teach. But this teaching position was in a school of business. And so that's where I stay until today. I actually met some of the architects of this program on a flight from Ottawa back to St. John, and was describing my background and found out that they wanted to have an IT type course, an IT and communications course for your program. So that's sort of how this came about, and I've sort of been alone. I've been with this program from that beginning. Um, I do have a photo here that you might see on my profile when I post, and a couple things. If you're familiar with the ancient style of photography, where wet was called wet plate photography, where metal or glass was covered with a silver nitrate solution and inserted into those old cameras with the cloth hood to keep out the light. And my daughter, who is actually coming to Halifax this fall to study her Master's of Fine Art and study clothing and photography, had just received this camera in this last summer and needed a subject to take photos. So my stern look is a clear reflection of the fact that you have to stay still for 5 seconds, depending on the lighting conditions. You have to stay still for a period of time. So um, I am not that stern in real life, I hope, and I don't think I'm that stern in my grading. So you can possibly feel relieved at that. Um, when this course first started, it was put together in a way that had a fairly technical focus and looking at a lot of the network and the infrastructure of telecommunications and how that enabled the internet and enabled communications as we know it today. And a few years ago, I refocused this course into uh, into something that was looking at social media. And part of my reason for that refocus was was because I felt that it's not the infrastructure where innovation happens. It's more often the services that the infrastructure enables. So if you're a salesperson selling washing machines, I'm not sure knowing the plumbing of modern day plumbing is a huge benefit in selling a device that takes opportunity of that plumbing. So I thought two things. One is that social media is pretty well what defines or social media and what I call the social web pretty well defines our modern existence on the internet. Uh, and and um, and I wanted that elevation of talking about the strategy of what we do on it versus what is behind it and what builds it. So um, this refocus took me to this look at social media and the impact of social media within our businesses, within our lives. But let me say four things with respect to that. And the first one is that I don't think anyone would disagree that um, social media really does dominate the modern life. Um, whether we're part of it or not, whether we're a user of many social media services or only a few, um, it is really part of our life, um, and we can't escape that. And I think for that reason, it's worth studying, it's worth discussing, it's worth looking at a higher education in a higher education situation. The second point I want to make is that I use a very broad definition of what I would call social media. So many people, when they think social media, they think specific applications, Facebook, Twitter. But I like to think of social media as any communication, electronic, digital communication that is enabled through the internet and through the web, and obviously now through mobile devices. I almost think young people today don't think about internet and web. They just have a mobile device of some type, and that is connected to integrated within this invisible communication network. So anything in some ways, even email, which predates social media or the modern definition of social media, I would suggest that even email falls within that category of electronic communication. So that's the second point. The third point, I think, as I hinted at earlier, I think because um, of the ubiquity of social media within our lives, it really is a must study. And I think as managers, trying to understand how to evolve our organizations, how to move our organizations forward, how to compete or see opportunities. This is a must study. This is how we live. This is how we share, how we communicate as individuals, and is increasingly a part of our corporate or our business lives. And so uh, that's sort of behind it all. Now, there's another part of this course that I'm just introducing this year, and that's an added focus on millennials. And I just want to touch quickly on this, um, and it's twofold, I guess. One is I've read a book that I thought captured a very positive, as you can tell from the title of the book, a very positive perspective on millennials. We see a lot of information in the popular press that seems to downplay millennials and the role of millennials in our workplace and in our modern lives as lazy, entitled, and such. But this book flips that and really does take, I think, an honest look at who they are. But part of what the book suggests is that it's these millennials that are the first real digital generation. And so, as you'll see from the book, they are the ones that will really, with or without our help, they are going to move us into a fairly modern world with respect to technology, the integration of technology. And whether all millennials fit this definition that you'll see in the book, or whether it's a smaller portion, I don't think it matters. I think the fact is we will see a shift, and the millennials are going to be a significant element in that shift. So again, as management, as graduate students in the study of management of business, I think having an understanding of how this particular cohort of young people are going to move within the workforce, and with what the book calls a digital mindset, will bring about some significant changes. So I think you'll see a nice overlap there between this move of our modern world into a very electronic. That our social lives are have become electronic in many ways, and that this millennial cohort as key individuals behind all that. Um, so that's the refocus and the and focus for. Um, Lastly, I just sort of want to talk about one last component, and this is in large part due to my background, but I like to take a very behavioral approach to study, especially if it involves people. And social media is, as the title suggests, is about people communication. Um, I don't know if you've thought about the definition of the term. I often contrast in my classes um, social media in contrast to traditional media. Traditional media being the earlier forms, all the way back, if you want, to telegraph, or even further back to distance communication through sound, drums, and visual smoke or other forms. But traditional media has generally been sort of one to one or one to many, whereas I think the shift that happens with social media is that it involves many to many, as well as all the one to ones and one to many. So, um, I think having a behavioral look is one that I think can be important. So, partly also because you may not be a big user of social media, and you may not be that interested in becoming a user of social media, but I don't think that will limit you in this course. I think that you'll still be able to contribute, especially if you try to use a behavioral lens. And so I see this um, uh, the activity, what we do in social media, what we do with the tools that social media, the tools that we define as social media, is that we communicate, we share, and we discuss, and we talk um, amongst each other. And so, if we're taking a behavioral approach, um, we can um, we can look at ourselves individually. How do we, as individuals, use social media to communicate, to share information? And then we can also look at how we do it collectively, socially. How do we do things with social media differently when we're talking to larger numbers of people, um, or in more social collective or situations? Um, because it's a behavioral look at, or because I'd like to bring a behavioral lens to the activities of social media, what that often means is that we have to make inferences because we may not be able to completely understand motivations or completely understand what's going on in individuals' behavior. So, as in any sociology or psychology study, that leaves us with potentially a requirement to infer. But in all that, I think you can participate. You can examine, critique, uh, explore what is the social dimensions that we're talking about, and how we can infer meaning and derive value for ourselves and for our organizations. So that's pretty well everything in a nutshell. Um, I do have a little video on this next. See if I can make it work. Oh, okay, so that's the I do have this slide that I forgot I was going to just wrap up. Focus on social media generally, and a focus on the millennials as one of the key drivers, one of the key ways that social media will be especially part of our businesses. Um, if if you weren't convinced this millennial argument of them, the role that millennials play, this next slide. Okay, it looks like I don't have the video. I'll post it separately. But I had a video of a series of books that have been written fairly recently on the impact of millennials. And it's just, you may get one of these um, emails from Amazon, since you now have a copy our textbook. And I was surprised just how many in the last few years, how many people are looking at the impact of this. So anyway, again, welcome. I'm looking forward to these next 5.5 weeks. I had meant to post this a few days earlier, but my throat, I don't know if in your part of the world, the bug that's going around is hitting, but there's this massive sore throat cold bug that's going around, and my voice would have been very grovelly. So I needed to give myself a little bit of a break, and I'm feeling almost better today. So again, welcome. I'm looking forward to finishing reading all your tech profiles. I've noticed that there's started to be some discussions online with respect to our first two papers. Those two papers are meant to kind of give you an academic framework to get started, to try to emphasize that when we look at social media, it's from the Keitzman article, it's about 7 specific social activities or things that define the kind of things we do when we're involved socially. We identify who we are, we share, et cetera, et cetera. And the second paper, Kane, about corporate social media and going right down to the 2 basic fundamentals. We talk with each other and we share content, and then what that means for engagement and things. So anyway, I hope you like those papers. They're going to be then the framework, which hope will then hope will be with you for the remaining weeks as we look through the Millennial textbook and the final set of readings in Module 3. Again, welcome. Reach out at any time, either on Brightspace or you can do that directly to me. And I'll try to put some more videos up when I get a chance. And all the best. Bye. Of